Good afternoon to you. It's now 4:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Margot Cleveland joins us from the Federalist this very hour. We talked to her at 4:30 about all of President Trump's ongoing legal cases. The lawfare continues. President Trump trying to end it. Margot reacts. Nick Fondacaro from the Media Research Center is here at 5 o'clock. CNN locked in a $1 billion defamation suit. That trial is ongoing. Nick has been in the courtroom. He'll talk to us. And then Congressman Riley Moore, freshman from West Virginia, tells us about his first days in Congress. That's at 5:30. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We'll continue to keep an eye on those fires on the West Coast, made worse by the fact that it's the left coast. All the details on that continue. But right now, I want to focus on what's coming in the weeks ahead here in Washington. We are expecting confirmation hearings imminently for the incoming Secretary of Defense, the nominee, Pete Hegseth. But there has been a secret, really up until this moment, effort to destroy him ahead of hopefully his confirmation. And for more detail on that, the woman who broke the story joins us now. Alana Goodman is here. She's a senior investigative reporter for the Great Washington Free Beacon. And Alana joins us on the phone. Hello, Alana.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Always nice to talk to you, and thank you, as always, for your excellent reporting. Tell me what you've learned about the effort to destroy Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there have been a lot of reports recently about Hegseth and his time previously at Concerned Veterans for America, Fox News, and other groups, claiming that he kind of encourage this culture of misogyny and sexism and drinking culture. And these reports have really been based on anonymous sources primarily. And so there was a question of who are the people behind this, who's talking to Democrats on the Senate Armed Services Committee who have been raising questions about these issues. And as we looked into it, we found that one of the people behind this is a former employee of Hegseth's at Concerned Veterans for America, who left after having some problems with her job there, and she received like a kind of a negative employment review, and then left in this kind of rocky manner. And that was about 10 years ago, and she's gone on to kind of be the coordinator behind the scenes in trying to get other CVA employees to speak to SASC, to the Senate's on the Armed Services Committee, and she also has spoke to them directly herself.
Okay, and so what it sounds like is that she had a short run at Concerned Veterans for America, and that it didn't go well.
Right, she was there for about 8 months, and she started in April and had a negative review in October of 2014, and then left shortly after that. So this was 10 years ago, and we have text messages from her reaching out to other former employees at CVA saying, hey, can you speak to Democrats on the committee about this? I'll help put you in touch with them. Here's their contact information, that kind of thing. And there are also indications that she's been the source to reporters in the past as well on some of these allegations. So, as a lot of these allegations are anonymous, I think it's also important to look at, who are the people behind them? What kind of motivations might they have?
Yes.
What kind of is their experience and their background with Hegseth? And, that's kind of critical when you're trying to evaluate this and understand if this stuff is accurate.
Right, yeah. She may make an allegation that's true, but it is helpful context to know whether or not she is a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind, and certainly what you're describing suggests that may very well be the case. What do other people at Concerned Veterans for America either actively or previously say about Pete Hegseth?
Well, we spoke to a couple of employees there who went on the record. They said that they really appreciated his leadership. He was a strong leader. He really transformed the organization, in their opinion, in a very positive way. And these were also some of the supervisors of this woman, Kat Dugan, who's been working with the Senate Democrats. And they also had some criticism of her performance while she was there as well. But again, these are people who are speaking on the record. They're putting their names out there. So there is that difference between the vast majority of the people who have been speaking out against Hegseth have been doing this, again, anonymously. And it's hard to evaluate who these people are without knowing their names.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what is Kat Dugan saying about all of this? The fact that you've discovered that she's working with the Senate Democrats to take down Pete Hegseth.
Well, she didn't respond to our request for comments on this, but I am curious. She, in one of her text messages that we obtained, she did say that she had been speaking to Senate Democrats and was talking to them behind closed doors about this. So I'm curious how much of that is going to come out. You know, Hegseth's hearing is coming up on the 14th of January, and so you know, how much of that testimony are Democrats going to be relying on during that hearing, and will they have anybody who comes in and shows their face and testifies and says these allegations publicly? I think that would be very interesting to see because, as I said, most of these are anonymous at this point.
Yes, and it is, of course, it's both obvious and continuously appalling that the Senate Democrats are undertaking not an effort to find out information that would help them make a wise decision about Pete Hegseth. It sounds like they're on an explicit fishing expedition to nuke his nomination.
Right. I mean, and that is something that we've seen previously with like the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And so this is something that you do occasionally see in Washington. I think Democrats really want a scalp from one of Trump's nominees, and they're looking at Hegseth as somebody who they might be able to do this with. But so far, as I said, you know, this stuff is all coming up anonymously.
Yes.
So we'll see next week if anybody, you know, is willing to go public and show their face and make these same allegations. And Hegseth will be able to respond to them directly. Yeah,
and you're right. We do see this a lot in Washington, but it does seem like it mostly goes one way because when President Biden nominated Lloyd Austin to be Secretary of Defense, there were plenty of Republicans there to vote on behalf of Lloyd Austin to confirm that nomination. It seems like Democrats really have their own axe to grind with President Trump and his nominees.
Right. I definitely. I think that they're going after Hegseth. I think he's really the main one because they do see some weaknesses here, and they see that these allegations are coming up in places like the New Yorker. They're appearing in different news articles, and it gives them something to basically recycle and point to when they have these hearings. And but as I said, the people who I spoke to, who spoke to me on the record, who were employees of Hegseth, said that they absolutely countered the other information that came out about him. They said that that was not their experience at all. They had the opposite experience. They felt that his leadership was great for the organization and that he really improved the organization during his time there.
Pete Hegseth's confirmation process barreling ahead is going to be one of the first. Hegseth is due to appear before the Senate Armed Services Committee on January 14th. That would make that just 6 days from now that he'll start doing that. In the meantime, that means Democrats are trying to load up their quiver with the types of allegations that may be coming from the woman that you're talking about here. Pete Hegseth's time as a veteran advocate, it doesn't seem ridiculous, actually. I've watched a bunch of interviews that he's done, and it seems like he very much is in the weeds on ways that veterans can be helped, in particular with the VA health system. He seems to know a tremendous amount about that. In other words, do you get the impression that he's in any way unserious about these issues?
No, I mean, from what I got on the record from employees at this organization, they said that he was great on them. Sean Pattison, who was a senior employee at CVA, he said that Hegseth transformed the CVA from a pilot project, quote, into the organization that delivered on Veterans Affairs reforms. So he really felt that they were able to accomplish an incredible amount on Veterans Affairs issues under Hegseth's leadership there.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes open for what this is going to look like. I'll never put it past the Democrats in the Senate to be absolutely ridiculous when it comes to these confirmation hearings. In the meantime, thank you very much, Alana Goodman. So good to talk to you as always. Always love the Washington Free Beacon and really appreciate you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Alana Goodman. The piece that she has up today at the Free Beacon, source behind Hegseth claims, is disgruntled former employee. And so you can already see kind of the makings of what this hearing is going to be like coming up again in 6 days, the 14th, where Democrats are going to throw ludicrous accusations at him. Those Democrats include Elizabeth Warren. Have you seen what she's been saying about Pete Hegseth lately? Elizabeth Warren is upset that Pete Hegseth has a Christian tattoo, and she says that he could be considered an insider threat, that he is some sort of extremist. Now, this is a woman who pretended that she grew up in an Indian tribe. She's a con artist, and she's accusing a man of having a Christian tattoo of hiding his extremism, that he's somehow deceitful. New York Post today. Senator Elizabeth Warren strongly suggested that there are concerns that Army veteran Pete Hegseth could be a, quote, insider threat due to his Christian tattoo. Why do they hate Christianity so much? And why can't we just point out that they literally just hate Christianity? Elizabeth Warren is attacking him for having a Christian tattoo. And she's been seething over his crusade against woke military policies in a blistering missive to the defense secretary designate. While outlining over 70 questions to Hegseth and giving him 4 days to reply, Warren made clear that she sees him as, quote, unfit to helm the Pentagon, and teased a fiery showdown when he appears before the Senate Armed Services Committee next week. Quote, I am deeply concerned by the many ways in which your behavior and rhetoric indicates that you are unfit to lead the Department of Defense. Warren, 75, who made up the idea that she's an Indian, wrote in the 33-page letter to Hegseth, sent late Monday. Quote, your confirmation as Secretary of Defense would be detrimental to our national security and disrespect a diverse array of service members who are willing to sacrifice for our country, she writes. Strikingly, the Massachusetts Democrat latched onto dubious concerns about a Deus Vult tattoo on Hegseth's bicep, a Latin phrase that translates to God wills it. God will. I can't even believe he did that. Warren pointed to a Reuters article recounting how a National Guard master sergeant believed the former Fox News host could be a, quote, insider threat. The master sergeant had done a quick internet search and determined that the tattoo had links to right-wing extremism and had been a battle cry for the Crusaders. National Guard leadership then pushed Hegseth out from serving during President Biden's inauguration day. Notably, top brass had been on high alert at the time in the wake of the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Religious scholars have later countered that the Deus Vult tattoo is often considered a common Christian symbol. Warren contended anyway that the fact that his superiors were concerned raises questions about whether he should be the Pentagon chief. Quote, you were also removed from President Biden's inauguration because of concerns that you're an insider threat after reports that your Deus Vult tattoo was a Christian expression associated with right-wing extremism. Wouldn't want a Christian expression to appear anywhere, would we? Quote, we cannot have a defense secretary whose fellow service members feel concerned enough to report as a potential insider threat. What? I mean, this is the same party. What's the thing that Plant talks about all the time? The after-school Satan clubs that the kids have, that the left has been advancing, that the left has been imposing on some of the kids, the after-school Satan clubs. This is the party of the after-school Satan club. She's upset that he's got a Christian tattoo. How many Wiccan chaplains do we have in the United States military right now? We have those, right? Wiccan chaplains in the military. It's like, what are you talking about? He's got a Christian tattoo? Yeah. Well, anyway, we've got problems, and it's not that Pete Hegseth is a Christian. That's not the problem. In fact, that adds to his character. That suggests that he's even more qualified to be the Secretary of Defense because he has a respect for the Almighty, which too few in positions of power do. They think they are the Almighty. Elizabeth Warren thinks she's God. That's why she's angry he has a tattoo that acknowledges that there is one and it's not her. What a crazy, crazy confirmation process this is going to be. And we're not even there yet. All right, let's see. I've got John calling in from Fredericksburg. He's on line one. John, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Oh, good afternoon, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. It's my second time able to talk to you in the last 2 months, actually.
Well, thank you for doing it.
So, yes, sir. So the tattoo that Pete has is not a right-wing organization tattoo. It's actually the symbol, and you can look this up, for the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. It's a prominent international Catholic organization which raises money to support Catholics and other Christians in the Holy Land. So Pete Hegseth, I know, is not a Catholic, but that symbol is the symbol used by the EOHSJ. So, I may be speculating a little bit here, but this, almost seems like another veiled attack on Catholics by the current administration.
Yeah, less than veiled, actually. No, so we're talking about two tattoos, actually. He's got the tattoo you're referring to is the Jerusalem cross, right? The one that he's got on his chest.
Yeah.
And then
that's the one. And then Dale's fault is, come on, I know what that means.
Yeah, God wills it, and it's like,
yeah,
and priests use it. Everyone, I mean, there's all sorts of Christians who readily and happily and very joyously, use it and reference it, and it's like, the whole thing is just ridiculous. It's meant to be a completely bigoted attack on his Christianity, and it's not the first time we've seen Senate Democrats do this. It won't be the last. But Elizabeth Warren trying to weaponize the fact that he's a man of faith against him, which is about as despicable as it gets.
Yes. Absolutely. I just wanted to make that clear that it's not right-wing, unless, of course, they don't want to start painting people like him as right-wing Christians.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, being a person of faith, being rational, respecting a higher power. If that makes me right-wing, whatever, fine, right-wing then. I don't want to be left-wing. Whatever the opposite of that is, I do not want to be that. Obviously. Coming up, Margot Cleveland joins us. She'll tell us all about all of Donald Trump's latest legal battles. The left is unrelenting. They're trying to tie him up. They want to sentence him on Friday. He's a convicted felon. President Trump throwing up some big fights this week. Margot Cleveland will take us through them in just a moment. Unbelievable. I'm not even going to play the audio for you because it's crappy. But Joe Biden, they concluded the briefing in California today. He was there. He's there in the area in Los Angeles. And, whatever happened to not sending the president into disaster areas because it would divert critical resources? Whatever happened to that? I guess that only applies to Western North Carolina. So there's President Biden in L.A. today. And this is a direct quote. Quote, they got notifications yesterday that their homes probably burned to the ground. But the good news is I'm a great-grandfather as of today. It was an actual sentence from the President of the United States. There's that famous Biden touch. Hello there. It's 4:36 now on WMAL. Coming up, Nick Fondacaro will be with us from the Media Research Center at 5 o'clock. At 5:30, the freshman congressman from West Virginia, Riley Moore, is here to talk about what it's like being there in Congress now and what they're up to. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump continues to lock horns with the out-of-control lawfare left this week as they're attempting a few last-ditch efforts to muddy him up before he returns to office. Joining us now to discuss all of it, Margot Cleveland is here. She's a senior legal correspondent for the Federalist. Margot, always nice to talk to you.
Oh, thanks. You too, Vince.
Okay, so we've got, I guess, I want to start with Jack Smith and Merrick Garland.
Sure.
Because this week, Eileen Cannon, the federal judge down in Florida, basically, she issued outright an order telling Merrick Garland and company that the United States Department of Justice is not allowed to release any element of a report about Donald Trump or his co-defendants until an appeals court resolves whether or not Jack Smith is even constitutionally appointed to the role. Is that right?
Well, mostly there's one added dimension to that, which is she also recognized that Trump's team had sought a stay with the 11th Circuit. So she made her order contingent on whatever the 11th Circuit decides to do on the stay, and put in there, and then for 3 days later. In other words, if the 11th Circuit denies the stay, hers is going to stay in effect for 3 days to allow Trump to go up to the Supreme Court and see what happens there. And I really think the reason that she did this was that she didn't want Garland or the special counsel to start releasing the report before the 11th Circuit could rule. And if they do now, they're going to be in contempt of her order.
Well, today we get an update on this story, which is that it appears Merrick Garland wants to operate in defiance of Judge Cannon's orders. He says that he is going to release portions of Jack Smith's report, specifically related to the 2020 election case. I should point out this case has been dropped. Jack Smith straight up dropped the case, that element of it. And yet Merrick Garland says he wants to release that portion of Jack Smith's report. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Judge Cannon say that the entirety of the report is forbidden from coming out until the 11th Circuit handles this?
Correct. And so that is surprising to me because he's bound by it. Now, again, with law, there's always this caveat, asterisk, footnote, which is once the appeal was taken to the 11th Circuit, an argument can be made that she has no authority anymore. What it does is it usually strips the lower court. So Garland could very much argue, well, she didn't have the power to enter that order, and because of that, I can just ignore it. That is a very risky proposition to have.
Yes.
He should really think twice about that because, one, if he's wrong, it would be contempt against him, and she could do a criminal contempt. And two, it really shows kind of a lack of respect of going through the process. If he thinks she lacked jurisdiction, then he has to challenge her ruling to the 11th Circuit. You don't just ignore it.
Well, and it's also a very brazen step taken by the party that claims that they're trying to uphold the rule of law. The Attorney General of the United States is telling a federal judge, up yours, I'm not going to listen to your order, and I'm going to do whatever I want. That's quite a statement from the party that pretends like Donald Trump is the one who's out of control.
Right. It absolutely is. And the one point that I would also add, and I was not aware of this until I read the appellate filing for stay, the case actually is not over. It's over against Donald Trump.
Yes.
But the indictment is still against what have been portrayed as his co-conspirators, which is why you have these two defendants saying this report can't come out because it will deny us our due process rights. It will deny us a fair trial. And that's why that has to be stayed.
Yeah. And these are the poor. These are the poor people who just they work for Donald Trump. They help him. They help him out on his property, specifically Mar-a-Lago. Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira. These two men. One of them is his valet. The other is his property manager. They're having their lives destroyed right now by the United States Department of Justice and Jack Smith simply because they work for Donald Trump. And the Justice Department doesn't even seem to care that they're going to be trampling all over their rights as they fight this process out by releasing a public report that would be designed to prejudice anybody's view towards both of these defendants.
Absolutely. And 2 points on that I think are just pretty intriguing. One, think about the gag order that was put about President Trump to prevent him from somehow causing some influence on the jury. If the special counsel's report comes out, that is going to be covered by everyone in excruciating detail. And the second point here, as these two defendants presented to the 11th Circuit, even if you redact everything about their names, Smith has gone against them as being co-conspirators. So everything that comes out is going to be, in the public's eye, held against them as well.
Yes.
So I think they have a really solid argument that we can't have this come out while they are still in jeopardy of criminal prosecution.
Also, what else could they possibly put in a public report that would be that would be new information? Everything we've seen so far from Jack Smith, we've seen tons of public court filings on this subject. We've seen endless headlines on this subject? Obviously, I've maintained throughout that's all been just ridiculous and lawfare. But what more could they do other than nicely bind it and then release it with some theatrical language to try and muddy up Trump before he comes into office?
Well, those are the two goals, because what has happened in the filings has been sporadic in different pieces, telling the entire story where you're crafting it with your words and, the select adjectives that you use. That really will be a way to try to get Trump in the final analysis. And the fanfare that would come with it, everyone will be covering this, especially from the legacy media standpoint. It is the Crossfire Hurricane Part 2 that happened when Trump was in office. It is the continued resistance to what Trump is trying to do, which is to immediately turn the country around.
Yes, and you should have utter contempt for them for doing that in the same way we do for the Crossfire Hurricane nonsense. So we're prepared when it all comes out. So let me move to another issue, Manhattan.
Sure.
That's where President Trump has been fighting to basically get rid of this entire bookkeeping case against him, brought by Alvin Bragg and overseen by the judge Wacky Juan, who is trying to impose a sentencing on President Trump this Friday. Now, this has been the subject of a flurry of court filings this week. I won't go over all of them, but that includes President Trump this morning asking the United States Supreme Court to intervene. Now, this is obviously a state case. Alvin Bragg was apparently reliant on his interpretation of federal law in order to structure this case. How can the United States Supreme Court get involved? Where do they have a role here? And could President Trump succeed, Margot?
So your last question first, he absolutely could succeed. And the reason it can go to the Supreme Court is Trump is basing his arguments on the idea of presidential immunity that comes from the federal Constitution. So even though the prosecution is based on a supposed violation of state law, he is alleging a defense of federal immunity. And that is something that only the Supreme Court in the final analysis can speak on. And here I would add one new development that has hit that you probably haven't had a chance to see. Justice Sotomayor actually ordered the defendants, or in this case, the respondents, which would be the DA, to respond by 10 a.m. tomorrow to Trump's motion for a stay. And I think that's going to be a key development. And here, let me explain why. I don't think the Supreme Court wants to have to rule on this, but I think they will if necessary. And I think when Justice Sotomayor put that out there, what that did is it told the New York courts, if you guys don't act, we're going to. And that will be enough to get the New York courts, the appellate court in New York and the highest court in New York, one of them to step in and grant the stay. So for your listeners to make sure they follow this, in addition to seeking a stay from the U.S. Supreme Court, Trump also sought a stay from the appellate courts in New York. Yesterday, one of the appellate courts denied it, but his exhaustion, his way of going up the courts is not yet finished. And I don't think that the New York appellate courts are going to want to get slapped down by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I think that Justice Sotomayor's order, or that they have to respond, is going to prompt the New York courts to step in and stay it.
Because the basics here, in this Alvin Bragg brought ridiculous case against Trump, some of the evidence that they introduced in the courtroom was when President Trump was in office as the 45th president of the United States. They were talking about him signing checks while he was the president of the United States, conversations he had with White House staff members. And in the intervening time, we get that Supreme Court decision that says, well, actually, any official acts conducted by the president of the United States are immune from prosecution. And so President Trump's legal team goes back to Juan and says, hey, this case is illegitimate. You're using a bunch of evidence that the court just said is immunized. And Juan, as I understand it, basically says, it doesn't matter. I don't really care that much. We're gonna consider the guilty verdict sound, and we're gonna move to sentencing. Is that right?
Absolutely. And here, it wasn't actually just the jury. The jury heard this evidence, but so did the grand jury. And that is another reason that the Supreme Court, if it has to, I think will act. The evidence that came in under the Supreme Court's precedent should not have come in. It shouldn't have been used before the grand jury. It shouldn't have been used before the jury. And that same case, the same case that the Supreme Court looked at, it was Trump versus the United States. It dealt with one of the special counsel's cases. It also spoke of you can't use it as evidence. Not just you can't charge them for a crime for doing it, but the evidence stays out. And it made clear that this idea of immunity is not just immunity from conviction, it's immunity from prosecution. And all of that goes to the idea that you have to resolve this question now. You don't go through the whole process, convict, sentence, and then say, oops, we screwed up.
Yes.
That defeats the idea of precedential immunity. But I would also add there's a second argument that Trump's attorneys are making, which is he has immunity through this transition period, not just once he's sworn into office. And this has never been decided by the Supreme Court before, but I think they've got a really strong argument here because theoretically, if there was no immunity, Trump could be sentenced to prison until the moment he is inaugurated. There's no way that can work in our constitutional system.
Because it would kneecap his ability to prepare for the job that voters just sent him to. And it seems to me that the court's been really clear to the extent that we have immunity for the president of the United States, both civil and criminal. It's designed to make it so that they have the widest latitude possible to execute the vision of the country in a dynamic way without concern of being paralyzed by your political detractors, awful political prosecutors, or people who are trying to get in the way of the agenda of the American people.
Absolutely. And I think that phrase you just used, the kneecap of the president, that's exactly what these New York Democrats are trying to do. They just will not stand down. They want to destroy Trump no matter what it takes, but they are destroying the country instead. Luckily, enough ordinary Americans see it that in the long run, I think it's going to hurt them that they continue this path.
Yeah. And it's still so ridiculous that Trump literally paid a legal fee. That's what a non-disclosure agreement is. He categorized it as a legal fee, or at least one of his bookkeepers did, and he got charged with a crime for it. It's so unbelievably dumb, but here we are, and they've wasted so much taxpayer money on it. Hey, Margot Cleveland from the Federalist, always so good to get your insights on all of this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much, Vince. I appreciate it.
That's Margot Cleveland. All righty, let's go to the phones. Glenn is calling from Sarasota, Florida. That's beautiful down there. Hello, Glenn. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, thank you for taking my call. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Glenn.
Great. Hey, just real quick, I'm a long-time listener. We lived up north and we relocated here to Sarasota, but we've carried you down here, and I appreciate your wisdom and input and such informed information. I just want to share a funny story with you.
Yeah. Since
we've come down here. I do sand carving on the beach, and Siesta Key Beach, number one beach in the United States. A lot of people internationally and of course in locals and all over the country. So I started doing some sand carving, and there's always a biblical message in it, and creates a lot of conversation amongst people, and I've talked to people from China, shared scripture and stuff. But at any rate, I do it in just you have to look at it to understand what it is. So I believe after today's news and hearing, or a nominee for the DOD is being ridiculed for tattoos, Christian tattoos, I think I know what my next sand arts are going to be for the next upcoming weeks, and of course they're going to be the ones that whatever Pocahontas or Elizabeth
Pocahontas,
is creating, yeah. So, and I'm going to stick a feather right in the middle of it.
Smart, I love it. So it'll be
top it off.
Jerusalem cross, Deus Vult. So when you do sand carvings, so I was a kid, I would take a stick and I'd write my name in the sand or something. Is that what you're talking about? What is a sand carving?
Well, it's like a sculpture. Ocean City, Maryland, always had them in front of their place. That's what my inspiration was. With Randy Hoffman down there.
Yeah.
And I just share them with. So basically, it's a sand sculpture.
Oh, I see.
But
I see. So it's like a sandcastle, but way more sophisticated.
Yeah, well, we're doing a little deeper in the sand because they might have a backhoe dump a load of sand in. So,
yeah.
So they're in-ground sand sculpture.
Man, you are living the life. Sarasota, Florida, enjoying the Gulf of America down there, making sand sculptures.
The Gulf of America, baby. I love it.
Amazing.
I think it's great.
Glenn, thanks for listening to us, brother.
If you want to see events, then you can check them out on my Instagram.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time for you to share it, but
okay.
Next time you do. Hey, thanks, Glenn. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're
Thanks,
up against
buddy.
it. All right, coming up, Nick Fondacaro from the Media Research Center. Riley Moore will be here, the congressman from West Virginia, and I'll be checking out sand sculptures until we get back in just a moment.